Hey, I got a question on the blog article I just published yesterday. Andriy is asking me, is a rational unified process methodology better than Agile? And this, I think, is a mistake because RUP is a framework which defines how exactly you develop software, what exactly you do, what are the steps, what are the roles in your software team, what are the documents you create, and how those documents should look, and what those documents should include, like what chapters, what sections, even what other words you have to say here and there, and what's the consequence of procedures and processes which you have to follow in order to achieve the result. Look at the Rational Unified Process browser. So we have phases here, and we have what do you call them? Phases, and then you have disciplines, and then in each discipline you have certain things defined inside. So let's take a look, for example, into the requirements. In the requirements, there are process areas, and I don't know exactly the names now, but I studied that many years ago. So let's click, for example, define the system. So in the define the system, you see a list of specific artifacts which need to be present there, and then we have a role of a system analyst, and we have processes which need to be done. For example, the system analyst has to develop the vision of the system. So to develop the vision, the system analyst has to, that's the purpose of that activity, and then those are the steps, and then what are going to be the input artifacts, and that what's the resulting artifacts, and many things are said here. It's not what you see in Agile, for example. There's way more. Let's click on vision, the document. That's the artifact. And the artifact is created by the role, the system analyst, and we have a template. We can click here and you see exactly, more or less exactly, but how your vision document has to look. So you see all the specifics, all the chapters, everything you need to mention is specified here. And then we can go to implementation, for example. Again, the process flow, and for example, in the implementation, you have to integrate the system. To integrate, you have the integrator, which gets the build and then does something like that. You can go to test, and in test, let's say, test and evaluate. It's even more complex. You have test designer, you have test manager, you have test analyst, and all the documents which they need to work with. They have change requests, they have test scripts, and if you click on the test script, you're going to see as well recommendations of how you design your test scripts and what you do inside. So my point is that Rational Unified Process, RUP, it's a huge framework with a lot of things inside, a lot of specific recommendations of how exactly you do your work. And Agile, on the other hand, it's a philosophy. It's not a framework. It's not a set of instructions. It's a just kind of philosophical set of points, quite small list of them, which say basically, for example, that we value individuals over tools. Like people are more important for us than tools. Or, for example, customer collaboration, like talking to people and understanding people's needs, is more important than specifications and requirements and papers, something like that. I'm not sure I exactly understand the philosophy of Agile, but that's what I read from the manifesto. They're saying that, for example, responding to change means more or is more important than following a plan. So defining a plan is important probably, but if changes need to be done immediately, then we're going to respond to them faster and with more attention than the documentation requires us to do. So that's a philosophical point, and a Rational Unified Process also has some philosophy behind it. They also have six best practices, they call it. So in Rational Unified Process, even though it's a large, huge framework, they have certain points, kind of philosophical points. For example, develop iteratively. They're saying, and I quote, "It's best to know all requirements in advance. However, often this is not the case." Or, for example, manage requirements. Kind of philosophical point that you need to manage requirements, and then they say, and I quote, "Always keep in mind that requirements set by users." It's close to what Agile is saying. Agile is saying that individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And rational unified process is saying always keep in mind that requirements set by users. So they're aiming at the same goal. We need to value users and customer requirements providers, and then everything else goes after that. All the documents, tools, and everything else. And that's kind of obvious. It's like obvious wisdom. I don't see anything unique there in any of them. So we can't compare them. Agile is like one page of text which just sets the direction for software developers. Rational unified process is a very specific set of documents. And I very much recommend you to study RUP. Well, I did that about 10 years ago, maybe even earlier, and I learned a lot of things there. I learned a lot of very specific details about software development. And I learned also some philosophical points from there. And after studying that stuff, I started to work on XDSD. That's the philosophy which was published about 10 years ago by myself, extremely distributed software development, XDSD. And there also we claim just one basic thing. The fundamental principle is that we want programmers and everybody else to be paid by result. Not by the time, but by the result. And that philosophical point distinguishes XDSD from everybody else, from Agile, from RUP, from Waterfall, from Scrum, from all the philosophies and frameworks. So we're saying we want to pay programmers for the results they provide, not for the time they spend in front of the computer. And then after that, on top of that philosophical point, we created Zerocracy, which is a practical implementation, which is a framework, which defines specifically exactly what needs to be done. If you look at the Zerocracy policy, you will see many very specific details about how exactly you achieve that, what needs to be done, what are the steps, what are the documents you create. So Zerocracy is a framework together with this Zerocrat, the bot, and the policy. And XDSD is a fundamental principle which lies below everything. So Zerocracy stays on top of that principle. Without that principle that we want to pay for the results, nothing would exist. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.